Welcome to the League of Extraordinary Storytellers, the podcast that takes you inside the dynamic world of themed experience design. I'm your host, Theron Skees. In each episode, I sit down with industry experts to explore how their teamwork and collaboration transform ideas into unforgettable destinations. I hope it inspires you to see the world through a brand new lens, one story at a time. Join us as we celebrate the visionaries who make the impossible possible. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the League of Extraordinary Storytellers. It is season 2, everyone. This is my first episode of the new season, and I'm really excited. If you watched all of or some of the episodes from last season and you've chosen to tune in, welcome. I'm grateful that you're here. This is a podcast where I get to talk with some amazing people out of the experience design industry. And we talk about mostly storytelling as it relates to the creation of experiences. But we talk about tech trends, we talk about the business of experience design, and a whole bunch of other stuff. For my first episode, I have an amazing guest for you today. She's an author and a speaker, and she does so much more. This is Pigalle. Please welcome.
Hi, Theron. Thank you so much for inviting me to open your second season. I've been so impressed by your first season and the high caliber level of guests you've had. So it's a real privilege and an honor. Thank you so much for inviting me. And also, to pick up on what you said, I've also been wanting to spend more time with you. So this is a fantastic opportunity to do so.
Thank you. That's the greatest thing I think about our community is it doesn't matter kind of how you fit into the community. You could be a writer, you could work in building physical places, you could be in a performative art somewhere, you could be digital. And I just love the fact that, we know of each other sometimes, but we don't get the opportunity for our paths to cross. So this is one of those times, and I'm so thankful that you're here.
Thank you.
Well, let's jump right into it. I am impressed by all of the amazing things that you've done in your career, and I wonder if you could just give us a brief introduction, the audience of who you are, of the kind of things that you are passionate about, what you love to do. That would be amazing.
Thank you, Theron. So for those of the wonderful listeners who may not have met me before or come across my work, my original background, which I will touch on and speak more about later, was actually studying theatre and working on West End shows for around 5 years. And then I moved into the fashion industry and I worked 10 years in the fashion industry, 5 of which I ran my own label, selling worldwide. And then all the skills I developed along the way for brand building, communications. Eventually, from fashion, my path led me into events, and I became what I called as being a creative producer. Until eventually, because I was a producer for 15 years, until eventually I discovered experience design and started calling myself an experience designer. And then since 2020, I moved into full-time becoming a consultant, a team trainer, an educator. So I run and teach courses at universities around the world. I run bespoke training for brands and world-leading organizations around the world. And I am so passionate about what I do that I also share my methods and approaches at keynotes and conferences also around the world. So yeah, so I'm pretty busy and I love what I do. And I've been doing it for so long. I mean, I started producing in 2005. So that gives you a sense of the period of time. And I'm more excited than ever. So yeah, it's an exciting time to be
Amazing.
in our field.
It's amazing. It it is this perfect time, it feels like, where technology, individual talent, and industry need, or I should say market need, within the experience economy. It just seems to be this really great overlap of things that has driven a lot of us into this space and to really be flourishing now. So awesome. Well, thank you for that. When I looked at your bio and all the amazing things that you have done, I looked at it as if your career had kind of sat at the intersection of art, science, and human emotion. And the way that you explained it actually was so much better than that. My first question is, what drew you to the idea of that experiences rather than products and services are really where the real value and meaning live?
So I'm going to take us back through time to the origins of where it all began for me before I had an understanding or the words to express it,
That's great.
because I think it's quite interesting to give some context to where I believe experience design has emerged out of. So I
Sure.
mentioned that my original background was studying theatre, working in theatre and West End shows. So I was really fascinated by the effect that performances on stage have with the audiences, traditionally sitting in the seats, passively observing. And then in 1997, I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and there was a whole buzz going about a production called it was a story of Angela Carter called The Bloody Chamber.
Mm,
And it was a production by the Grid Iron Production Company, I think they were called. So back in 97. And they had called it a promenade performance. I didn't know, I'd never heard of that word, didn't know what it was. But the buzz was that it was taking place at night in the vaults underneath Edinburgh City, and people were getting so scared that they were fainting. So I was like, I have
that's
to
awesome.
beg, borrow, or steal a ticket. I need to find out what this whole fuss is about. So I turned up, and we were instructed to turn up outside the vaults, and it was, in my mind, it was midnight, but it might as well have been. And we were met by the actors holding flame torches, and they told us that we have to follow them. And so I thought the spooky bit was that we were going to follow them into the vault, sit down, and it's because the vaults are a bit creepy, and then they're going to go on stage. And there was no stage. Instead, what they did was we had to follow them, and the story happened with us in the story. We were immediately, right from the moment they met us with the flame torches, imaginatively, viscerally, sensorily, emotionally, we were part of the story. And the actors, we had to run after the actors. They would break the fourth wall and turn to us and say things. Um, I could see them sweating. I could,
Wow.
feel the emotions they had. And it was just completely incredible. And it completely blew my mind. And when I left, I was like, the traditions of theatre are over. This is what performance should be. The audiences should be protagonists. There should be a journey that they go on. They shouldn't be silent. We should be active. We should be speaking, interacting with the performers so that the story becomes ours. And I was so excited. And I was like, this is the next big thing. And then I waited 10 years. And basically, because it was Edinburgh Fringe, it was, quite an edgy underground production. It didn't catch on the way that I felt its potential was. And then in 2007, I went to an underground, at the time it was underground production of By Punch Drunk. So they weren't well known in the mainstream yet. And it was the Mask of the Red Death, which was
Yeah.
at the Battersea Arts Centre. And by then, the language that was being used was that it was a site-specific promenade performance. And so I was like, promenade performance. Oh my God, I've been waiting 10 years for one of these. And it's site specific. What does that mean? So I went to the Mask of the Red Death, and again, it blew my mind. And again, I was like, this is the next big thing. This is so powerful when we are active members rather than passive viewers and spectators.
Right, right.
And then it just took so long for then to come out of the underground of theatre to go mainstream. And through that period, I was also seeing productions by other edgy collectives like The Shunt collective, the beginnings of the early productions of Secret Cinema, which were amazing. And it took time for it to come out of the world of theatre to go more into events. And that sort of, yeah, it took another decade. So I've been hanging in there for a while. So I would say that's the origins for me personally of feeling the power and potential, but not yet knowing how to describe it or to transpose it to other industries.
Right. I think what a powerful catalyst to experience theater in that way, especially as it was emerging. And I really love that because I've had Stacey Barton is a friend of mine, right? We work together quite a bit, and a lot of her background is performance, not only directing performers but also participating in there. And I've just learned so much from her and from others. So to hear you say that is just it's amazing. It really speaks deeply, and I get a real sense of your origin story and how that played such a huge part in the defining for yourself this idea of designing an experience. And now, fast forward till recent times, you get the opportunity to work pretty extensively with cultural institutions and scientists and artists and all these amazing um, markets and professionals and areas. And that's probably a whole nother show in itself, how experiences now kind of cover so many different markets, but I won't go there. I won't allow myself that rabbit trail. What I was going to ask you is, when did you really begin to see experience design kind of not as just a performance or as a creative practice, but literally as a discipline, as something that you could teach, that could be structured? When did those things come together for you?
So, from that background of being in theatre and more of a personal interest, and then the trajectory of my life through working in fashion and then eventually moving into events. Since, as I mentioned, since 2005, I became a producer. And initially, the early part of my career, as I'm sure many listeners can relate to, I just developed my own approach very intuitively. I was greatly inspired by what I was seeing, what I was being involved in from these other disciplines, and I was transposing them into the work that I do. But I was doing it very much in the sense of making it up as I go along and then seeing the effect it has with the audience. And I would say that this two-way relationship with the audience was crucial for me, because overall I was producing for 15 years. And as you mentioned, I worked for many cultural, arts and scientific organizations in the UK. So many of the projects were publicly funded. And a remit of public funding is that almost all of my projects had to be evaluated. And there was a very deep evaluation report that would be produced because I had to demonstrate that my projects were leading to impact, not just quantitatively, but qualitatively.
Wow.
So
Wow.
they were extremely thorough.
What a
And
discipline.
yeah, and it was great because I'm a super nerd. I love to research, find out, learn things. And so I developed for my own practice of two-way dialogue with the audience, which is during the productions, I would observe, ask my team to observe. And then when we debrief, we go, collate all the observations. But once the evaluation reports were produced, I would then go through all the pages and I would learn, okay, what things did I or we do in my team that was really effective that we can build on and develop further? What did I do that didn't land the way I wanted? And what could I do differently the next time? And then new ideas would come up. How can I extend the influence of this impact? How can I push this even further in the next production? So each time I developed events, projects, installations, pop ups, campaigns, be it live or digital, and with technology within everything, it meant that I was constantly moving forward. I wasn't, as can often be the case, just running in the same spot from project to project, but I
Right.
was learning and growing and improving and improving and improving. But while I was doing all of that, I was being extremely busy, as fellow producers know, being hands on, literally in muddy fields, creating, building, breaking down, creating the next project, debriefing the next project. And so I was just busy in the act of the doing and learning while I was doing. And then from 2005, then in 2012, a colleague of mine called Suzanne Bach sent me an email. And that email came to me while I was at Burning Man Festival. So I didn't see the email, but I'll never forget coming out of Burning Man Festival. And this was one of the first emails that I read when I sort of was mentally ready to switch back on into the world. And her email said to me that she wanted to invite me to co-develop and co-teach a course called Experience Design at Central St. Martin's, which is a very renowned design and arts university in London. And would I like to join her? And because I wasn't busy enough, and because I had never taught before, and because I didn't know what experience design was, of course I said yes. I can't resist the challenge.
Exactly.
And it gave me the most incredible opportunity that while I was busy producing and doing the work, walking the walk, teaching gave me the discipline of having to reflect. What is it that I'm doing? Why is it having this effect that I can see and read in these reports?
Right.
And how do I turn what I'm doing into simple and clear methods that anyone else from any other design discipline in any other part of the world can take and use in their projects and practice and profession? And so teaching since 2012 has really given me that chance to thoroughly test, iterate, and prove the effectiveness of all my methods, because, it just, it gave me that amazing platform to do that. And the extra bonus I had was I was working with all these leading scientists. And at the time, very few people were thinking about experience design. And even less people were thinking about what's the science behind this. But I was fully involved in the world of science and all these different scientists who were doing their research in their areas. But I naturally think in a holistic, multidisciplinary way. And so I started to connect the dots between their specific areas of research, but apply it to experience
Nice.
design and my methods. And I became really fascinated about making them rigorous and really underpinning them with, it's not just me saying it, it's not just me learning and testing it with audiences to know that it works and that other people can use it, but there is science to back this up. And because I work with scientists, I also learned the rigor of checking the science. A lot of people throw science around, but
Right.
I'm really careful with it because of my background. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so that helped me transition over to solidifying it eventually into a process and a system that I'm now, happy to share and empower others with.
That's so wonderful. I love the picture that you're painting about your experience, and it resonates so deeply, not just with me personally, but with others that I know and that I've spoken with in our community who are just so naturally curious, that uh, and not afraid of hard work, that you you put yourself in positions where you're exploring and you're experimenting and you're curious and you're learning from different sources, and you're not afraid to, you know, traditionally artists would not really want to mix with designers or with scientists because, I just need to be free, man. They need. And so to see those things all come together in a beautiful montage. I love that. I really do. I think that's so beautiful. And it describes, maybe for a lot of audience members who are listening or watching, describes a lot of their background. I love photography. I love illustration. I love mold making. I love sculpting, and all of these really interesting, but sometimes very different skills can be woven together in a career. And one of the only places you can really do that is in this experience design world. So I'm just so grateful that you explained that. I wondered, did all of that experience lead to the point where you wrote your book? Because I just think your book, The Experience Design Building Blocks, offers some really clear, put together, codified, if you will, framework. And you were just kind of going there. So I'll give you a little bit of a push. Where was the gap that you saw in the industry that kind of made you feel like, you know what, this structure is necessary and would help people?
Through teaching, I saw year on year the cohorts grow. And originally, the cohorts came by mistake because they thought it was a UX class. For many years, and we would often say to them, put your hands up if you think this is UX, and all the hands would go up. And we'd say, please don't leave, try us out for a few weeks. And we're going to show you what experience design is and how you can then apply UX and all the other types of design to it. And so what we saw was the transition of people coming by mistake to people coming specifically because they want to learn about experience design. And the cohorts have grown and grown and grown. And initially, when we were co-teaching and co-developing the course, we were bringing our own perspectives, our own methods, our own frameworks. And we kept building it and iterating it, because also it's really important to stay current. The landscape that we live in, as we know, is rapidly changing. And so the experience design itself needs to be in motion to keep up and move forward with everything. But it was reaching a critical mass where the cohorts were asking for a set process, A to Z, beginning to end. And then that started me on the journey of wanting to codify it and wanting to establish a cohesive experience design system for our industry that people can then lift off from. And so then I had several years of trying to decide on the structure of that process. So I started with it linear like a line. Then I wanted it to be cyclical, because it is cyclical, because you do one experience, be it an event, product, or service, and then you go and create the next cycle. And in fact, then I was like, it's actually a spiral. It's not just a cycle. And then I started looking at the double diamond, which is part of design thinking. And the double diamond was popularized initially by the British Design Council, and then really moved forward with IDEO when they then established design thinking around the world.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at design thinking and the double diamond. Meanwhile, I'm going around the houses with what way am I going to structure my process? And then I realized, why invent the wheel? The double diamond and design thinking is already huge. And in the business and design world, it's known, businesses want it. And my feeling was the way that design thinking blew up around the world, I've always felt experience design is going to do the same. It's the next step in design thinking. It's the next big thing. And so I thought, let me take the double diamond that's established for design thinking, and I could see that there were similarities and aspects which on the surface overlap. And so I went quite deeply into it, and then realized actually, specifically for experience design, it needs to be a triple diamond, because there's a whole stage at the end which is about determining, evaluating, and taking the learnings and integrating them so that you can then do the next loop and the next spiral. And so I expanded it to be a triple diamond process. And then within each diamond, they open up for a very specific set of methods, but applied to experience design. So some of the methods and tools, such as storytelling, people might say, oh, but we use storytelling in design thinking, but it's used in a really different way. And I apply and use it in another way.
Right.
So in my guidebook, I share the triple diamond process, and I list some of the aspects of the double diamond. But the triple diamond in itself could be a book in itself. And the triple diamond is the aspect that I then go and train teams and leaders in their organizations how to use it, apply it, and then integrate it within their systems and processes as well. So within each of those, there's actually a whole load of other things that go on. But I had to decide the length of my book and when I would finally finish writing it. So that's the depth of all of that I use for the training and keynotes and podcasts
Right.
and things.
I love that. I think it's so amazing. Having, not to make it about me, just as you were talking, I was going through the same thinking of what it took when I wrote my book, and just that I love the fact that you have so many different aspects of your background. I mean, fashion design, and theater, and all of these things that cross over and weave together. It's almost like you have this all this knowledge and experience inside of you that's kind of bursting out. I know when you, at least it happened this way for me, when I got to meet with students and being in such a different place, and it sounds like it was very similar with you. It felt like you had so much to be able to give out of your experiences that the book just seemed like a natural sort of
Yes.
outpouring. This should exist, and these lessons and processes that I've had, it should help people. And it's great to hear that.
I'd like to also build on something actually about the
Please.
multidisciplinary approach, which I do touch on in the book, which is I like to think holistically and look broadly. I don't like to stay, no matter the project. And when I used to be creating the projects myself as a producer, when I was doing the research and development stages, I wouldn't, and I also did, as an aside, I did also do experiential activations for creative agencies as well. And traditionally in the agencies, one of the common things they would say when they wanted people to develop ideas was look at other campaigns, look at other adverts, look at other experiential activations. So I don't like to stay in the one lane of the industry or design field or even the topic. Since I was curating collaborations between artists and scientists, and I came from fashion and theatre.
Right.
And what I had learned along the course of my own journey is you could be doing something in one discipline, and then there's something that sparks a light bulb for you.
Mm.
And then you think, that's actually quite clever and smart. And actually that's being used in that industry would be really helpful in this industry. I can just transpose it and it will make such a huge effect in this other industry. So these cross connections, I get really excited by, and I think the magic moments and innovation truly take place in the overlaps, in the intersections. And I like to call those intersections the liminal spaces of possibility.
Mm.
And I'm endlessly excited by possibilities.
I love that. That's so nice. One of the things that I like that you mentioned when you were talking about design thinking and IDEO and the double diamonds, and that you need another diamond. And I think one of the things that immediately leaped off of the page, if you will, of your work is that you passionately believe that experiences should be filled with emotion, because it's emotion that connects us as an audience to something that's designed, an experience. And I'm extremely passionate about that. That is the sort of sum total of what I took out of my well, little over 30 years professional career in the industry. That I kind of boiled it down to that. So when I saw that it was something that you were passionate about, I'm wondering if you can explore that a little bit with me. You know, from your perspective, what separates an experience that's just simply well designed from one that really stays with somebody, really makes this connection and causes them to come back and enjoy that experience again and again?
So it's a really good question. And I will provide my definition of what an experience is. And I want to acknowledge that in our field, there are lots of descriptions and explanations, and I encourage everyone to explore them all fully and align with what resonates for each person with their own practice and profession. So from my own perspective of having observed hundreds of thousands of audiences and tracked and measured them live and digitally, um, that's what led me to creating this definition of what an experience is. So when we're designing an event, a product, or a service, these are all the things that take place outside of us as the audience, as the consumer. And we go to lots of events, we interact with lots of services, we use lots of products, and that's fine. But if we want them to stick and have an effect and change behavior, then they have to do an extra step. And the extra step they have to do is they have to break through our internal barriers and they have to go into our minds. And once they go into our minds, the potential then is to create internal changes. And I say that there are 3 internal changes that can take place. There are changes in our emotions and the way we feel, changes in our thoughts and shifts in perspectives, and ultimately changes in our actions and behaviors. So a big misunderstanding that people make about experiences is they think it's the external visual spectacle and entertainment. And what I would say is it's not yet. It's just spectacle and entertainment, which is fine and it can be that. But once it's gone inside people and it has this internal, I like to compare it to the process of alchemy, the person becomes changed from these internal reactions, then they're having an experience. And so it's a very fundamental shift in our thought and approach when we understand that an experience is what takes place within people. Because the shift that comes for us is then the spectacle and the entertainment doesn't become the end and goal in itself.
Right.
They become our tools. Because our aim is to, how are we going to use those tools? How will we design them to create this internal reaction and experience to take place? And then there's a third part to this, which is if you've had an internal experience, what I believe is when you've finished the experience, when you've finished interacting with the product, using the service, or you've left the event, there should be some type of change that takes place afterwards.
Yeah.
And that change can be small. It can be a gradual evolution that takes place over time, or it can be instant and a revolution that changes your life forever. And that happens with life experiences that we have, these big moments in our lives when nothing is quite the same before. And that change that takes place afterward is how I define what transformation is. It's the resonance and effects that starts to apply and integrate into your life afterwards. And it can be small or large. So for me, an experience hasn't taken place if transformation doesn't also happen afterwards. For me, there is a cause and an effect, and they're intertwined and interconnected. And I thought about this recently because I was thinking back to some of the really incredible events and productions I've been to that were made me very emotional, were really spectacular. I've never forgotten them. I love them passionately.
Hmm.
But if I think about it, nothing changed for me afterwards. Like, the topics that were covered didn't change my original opinions or thoughts about them. Beyond loving it, there was no other type of emotion that changed for me, and certainly no change in my behavior. Maybe the only thing is I just kept buying tickets to see the next one. And I realized that just because it made me emotional and I've never forgotten it, that wasn't enough for it to be an experience, because
Mm.
I wasn't transformed afterwards. So I think when we start to see it from those points of views, it it radically changes why we're designing, because we're not designing anymore just for it to be spectacular and entertaining. We're designing for it to be transformative and have impact. So that becomes all those external elements, whatever they are, become our tools. And then we can become intentional about that internal experience to lead to that impact. And then the design process starts the other way round. And I call it designing with a transformation strategy, which is strategically starting from what is that impact and transformation, and then in order to reach that, what are those internal changes that I
Mm.
need? And then we develop the ideas of what those tools will be. For me, I don't really care what the thing is. Event,
Right.
product, service, building, space, that doesn't matter to me, because the design of that will emerge much more naturally and effectively as the right designed to match the audience if we start with what is that transformation impact long term that we want to generate for them.
I think that's amazing. It's such a smart approach. I have to ask, just from what I've experienced, my assumption is that you really need the right client for that kind of work, right? Because some clients are looking for this. I just, I want something entertaining. I want something, maybe something that's deep. I want create an experience that resonates with people. And just from my experience, finding a client that wants that is unusual. Most people kind of are really just interested in this surface type of an area. But what you've described is so wonderfully. I'm imagining finding that kind of a client is rare. Has that been your experience, or no?
So it was, but it's changing very rapidly
Good.
now. Yeah, so that's the good news. And
That is
thank
good news.
goodness I hung in since 2005. I hung in, teaching in 2012. I hung in, and it's getting really exciting for us all. So I would say that absolutely people like yourself and me and the listeners out there, for many years, we've known this is going to become really important. Businesses and organizations are going to need this, but they didn't yet feel that they had that need. So we were a little bit too, or very early off the curve. um, but I would say that the pandemic and COVID, unfortunately, that it took place, but what it did do is break down the systems and the economic landscape from before. And businesses can't go back to business as usual, because it's it the whole landscape has changed. I
Right,
compare it, and we're still in the process of change with the landscape,
right,
and the change is and disruption is coming faster and faster and faster. And I compare it to standing on top of an earthquake. We're standing on top of all these tectonic plates, and they're crashing, and they're unpredictable, and they're moving in different
mm,
directions. And the traditional structure for businesses was modeled on the pyramids, being solid in order to withstand disruption and in order to not come crumbling down. And it could last through the ages. However, I would argue that this pyramid, solid, immovable structure is no longer fit for purpose if you're on top of tectonic moving and shifting plates, because what it does is it creates stress to that structure, and it creates fissures and gaps to form. And eventually, from within, it's going to weaken that structure and the structure will collapse. And what I advocate is moving towards a more mobile ecosystem that can then be agile, iterative, and responsive to move with the unexpected disruptions, adapt, reshape, reform.
Love it.
And the thing is that our audiences and consumers are also rapidly changing. So they're not static either. So where in the past, with the pyramid structure and organization of a business, you could predict and control what your product is, what the need is, the timeline to market, the timeline that it's going to stay in the market, your profit margins, that window and timeline is shorter and shorter and shorter. And the consumer and audience's needs are changing faster and faster in response to the world around us. And so for people like yourself and me, this is, from our perspective, this is fantastic, because finally
Right.
businesses and organizations are starting to realize that they need this approach for the sustainability of their businesses and organizations, for them to have competitive edge, for them to stay relevant and meaningful in this changing, demanding landscape. And that consumers and audiences are demanding something different.
Yeah.
It's not business as usual. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's not just churn out what you had before. It requires a different changing world, requires a different changing way of working, and a different changing process that has built within it the flexibility and adaptability and agility to meet the demands of a new world.
Yeah. So well said. So well said. You can see the results of a lot of that changing groundwork, that foundational shifting, in evidence of certain large institutions that no longer exist. I mean, you talk about some large retailers, for example, that are either completely out of business or are going out of business, and it really just as a one indicator of that, there are many. And it's true, when you refuse to adapt and to change, you end up in ruins. And so that's such so smartly said. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
I'd actually like to just build on that to do with the
sure.
economy, because it would be remiss of me not to mention a truly groundbreaking book that was published in 1999, which is The Experience Economy by Joseph Pine and James Gilmore,
Of course.
which when I started teaching this course that I didn't know was called Experience Design, my colleague Suzanne, the first thing she said to me is, "You have to read this book."
Required
And
reading.
absolutely. And what was amazing about the book was it gave a vocabulary for me to start understanding what I'm doing, and very importantly, that there is economic value in this since 1999. And so the exciting thing is that through the great work of Joe Pine and James Gilmore, and Joe Pine's next book, which has just come out, which is the next bestseller called The Transformation Economy, through the great work of people like him, he's helping to blow those gates open for the rest of us as a movement to come through. And I'd
Absolutely.
also like to just also pay dues and respect to another very important person that has also helped people like you and me to become a global movement, is James Woolman, who was one of your amazing podcast speakers before, because in 2020, James Woolman had the vision and understanding to think about creating a community of global experience designers and bringing us together, building strength and momentum in numbers. And through that amazing communities that we're both active in and how we've met, um, and the work that James and his team do, it's people like him that are and Joe Pine that are creating these huge step changes, and those step changes took long to come, but they're now the speed is accelerating,
Yeah.
and those step changes are becoming faster and faster and faster. And so that sense of urgency was also why I felt I need to get my book finished. As many of us know who write books, the hardest bits are, and the longest time takes to start writing the book. It takes years before you finally put pen to paper and start writing it. And then the worst, longest bit is trying to finish, because then you're like, and I want to say this, and I want to say that, and I want to show this, and I want to share that. And so but I really felt 2025 last year, I had a huge feeling of momentum that this is the right time and place in history to finish and get the book out, especially with so many of our wonderful colleagues in 2025 also, publishing and sharing their methods, sharing their framework, sharing their perspectives. And I just really feel that there is this huge wave building, and that the time is now. There's no time to waste. And I want to be there at the front with everyone to really maximize this opportunity to come and bring it and help empower others to also become advocates and champions of what we're so passionate about.
Absolutely. That's so well said, and you're completely right. I feel the same way about both of the gentlemen that you mentioned. Joe actually turned out to be a great friend. He's not just a great author and a good speaker. He happens to be a really great human being. So he joined my podcast first season and actually wrote the foreword to my book. And of course, James has been a friend for a while. So amazing two people that you brought up, and it feeds right into my next question so well. So thanks for that setup. We can't do what we do as individuals, and I often say to students, you hopefully I think you feel the same way, that even if we had a vision for something, an experience, a design, a destination, something, we couldn't accomplish it ourselves. It would require the input of so many other extremely and diversely talented people to come in. And in the end, when it's complete, it's no longer my vision or your vision, it's our vision together, this collaboration. So that's kind of my next series of questions, is really about collaboration in our industry. You mentioned multidisciplinary, and you're absolutely right. It ranges from scientists to strategists and artists and writers and technologists. And in that case, it really is cross-disciplinary. We're kind of working interdependently. What have you learned about collaboration at all of those intersections to kind of move a particular vision forward?
I keep smiling bigger and bigger and bigger with everything that you were saying, because I so concur with everything you've said, and I'm a big advocate of collaborative working, especially for organizations that want to start taking the journey of adjusting and shifting from the traditional top-down hierarchical pyramid structure to a more flattened hierarchy sense and respond approach of an agile ecosystem, which requires all the members of the team to have agency, to also bring ideas, make decisions. And so it's a very different systemic way of working, and you can't jump from one to the other. It takes time to evolve and gradually emerge into this future form of businesses. But the key for that to work is collaboration. So a lot of the common challenges that I come across and I'm presented with the teams and organizations that I work with around the world is that many departments are still working in a siloed fashion, just by the nature of the way the organization is built and structured, and everyone is in their little cube sometimes literally in their cubicle,
That's right.
but but that each person's doing their bit, and they care about their bit, and then they go home and they care about the life that they're living at home, and then they come back and they do their bit, and they don't really understand what happens when their bit goes to the next department and team, and it's out of sight, out of mind, and then they do their bit. And then the next team don't really understand what went into it from the colleague who passed it on, because they're not in that department. And now they're just busy with what they do with it. And the chain of command, and when it goes through the departments, an idea or a concept, by the time it comes out the other end, sometimes has moved really far away from its origins, and maybe not in a productive way. And so one of the things that I like to do is break those silos down, like reduce those boundaries, soften them, and bring people to work together cross department, work and collaborate on practical exercises through the training, to start learning about each other, people from each other's, because people forget that people aren't their job role. People aren't their title. People are humans. They have creative impulses. They have creative hobbies. They have things they do at home. They have things they do with their families. Everyone's got thinking and abilities and talents and incredible emotional intelligence skills that can be drawn on. And so when we can get people from cross department to work together and go through the triple diamond process, they start to understand a lot better. Oh, that's what you do. And what you do, you can now understand how that helps me in what I do.
That's
And
right.
quite often what happens is afterwards people say, this was so valuable, talking and working with colleagues from different departments. It's made me see things in a different way, techniques that they use that I hadn't thought of. And actually, in my own role, I want to expand it so that I bring in more information that will help the next team more. And I want to speak to them more so that then the whole process is more cohesive and joined up with a better result at the end. And then I just want to build out a bit further about this word collaboration, because a lot of people want to do it, have good intentions for it, but don't quite get to effective collaboration. And I would like to suggest that there are some conditions that are needed to foster collaboration to take place. So
Perfect.
the very first important thing I would say is safety. And this is psychological safety and real safety. So an environment needs, and an internal culture needs to be fostered that encourages people to be able to say things and to think of things and say them no matter how trivial, silly, or strange they might be. So psychologically, there needs to be an atmosphere which encourages the feeling that you can say anything and you won't be judged and you won't be laughed at and you don't have to be clever. And the other thing is real safety. You really have to feel that you're not going to upset your manager, your leader, the head of the organization, or you're going to lose your job, or it's going to cause you trouble. So safety is a whole topic in itself, but just want to touch on that's the first cornerstone.
Yeah.
And the reason I like to foster safety, psychological and real otherwise, with teams and their leaders is because I want to then create an environment for play to be able to take place. And by the word play, what I also mean by that is it's through play that we can experiment. And it's through trials and experiments and testing ideas that eventually the spark of something really innovative can start to emerge and grow. And so without feeling safe, you can't start to play and experiment. And within play and experiment, I also like to change certain words to reframe them, because I think words are really powerful. As you know from the way I wrote my book, I'm very, very specific about the words and the impact that they can have and the way they then change our reaction to them. So within internal cultures, there is often the word failure. And so I like to reframe that because it's very restrictive and it creates barriers and boundaries, and it
Sure.
prevents people from play and experimenting and developing ideas and concepts. So rather than the word failure, I like to use the word learning. And so when you're experimenting and playing and developing ideas and going in lots of different directions, it's okay. Not all direction has to lead to something brilliant. Quite often, we need lots of learnings and lots of weird and wonderful squiggly directions that when we pause and look back on it, we can then pick out the golden bits and say, these bits that are emerging, those we can correlate and interconnect and have those unexpected, innovative
Yeah.
sparks that come out.
So true.
Another really important part of collaboration, and you talked about this when you introduced this question, is about the sum of the parts is greater when we all come together and build it together. And so when you have safety and you have permission to experiment and play, then what you need to do is then start to feel comfortable with letting go of your ideas. And the creative act and process is very personal. It is very emotional for people. And people don't, have a lot of fear about saying an idea and then it's going to be shot down. So I like to advocate a yes and approach where we build and maintain forward momentum. We don't create blockages and barriers. We build and see what those possibilities are, learn from them. And so, needing to be able to let go of your ideas is crucial, because one of the things I often say is whenever I have a project or a brief, I would write down all my initial ideas. It could be this and it could be that. And no matter how wonderful I might think they are, I would then throw them away. And I would do that with my teams as well. If we had an initial brainstorming and then get rid of it, because for me, that would be the most obvious ideas. And then I'd want to say, and also I'd want people to get it all out of their system so they don't cling on to these ideas and
Right. Right.
and then but I said this idea and I really want this idea to take place. I was like, let's get that all out of our system and then out of the way. And then let's not come up with ideas. Let's start the process with research and development. And the first part of that is really understand your audience, your consumer, your client, who this is for, because we're not designing for ourselves.
Yeah.
Collaboration is about designing for others. And when you start to understand that, it takes the pain and the personal emotions and the feeling of wanting to cling on to your idea. It helps to let go of that, because then what you're driven by is what's going to be the best final concept and design and output for our audience. That becomes your guiding light, your North Star.
Yeah.
And then you can be impersonal and unemotional and more strategic when you're sifting through all the ideas to say, well, what's really going to fit with the greater outcome of impact that we're looking for? And so that really helps. And then the final thing I really want to mention, because it's also a really important factor for collaboration to take place, is there is a wrapper that needs to be taught, I would suggest, for all those elements to take place, which is communication.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in general, as a society, we don't know how to communicate. And the mode of communication that most of us, including myself, were brought up with is more a blame game. If something goes wrong, whose fault is it? And usually I'm defensive. I don't want it to be my fault. I'm going to point the finger and say it was that other person and it's nothing to do with me. And that is a really deficit, destructive, non-growth model of communication.
Right.
And so what I've been learning and training myself and practicing with myself, and then what I teach and weave and bring to the training is a different form of communication, which is two-way dialogue. And it's not about whose fault is it if something doesn't work out, but it's let's investigate together. Why did it not work the way we thought? And what can we do to build on it, expand it, and get it to work even better than our original idea? And so with communication, it's also about, ironically, because I'm speaking so much now, but ironically, it's about learning to listen to others.
Absolutely.
So I can look at the mirror and face my own aspects as well. But it's in the trainings that I do and the teachings, it's also about the cohorts and the teams and the leaders learning to listen to each other, hear and acknowledge what others are saying and give equal value to what people are saying, and try and be open to experimenting what others are suggesting, and then also learning how to give effective and constructive feedback. Because I do the diverge converge way of working where everything's open and we're going to try everything, but at a certain point we do have to make decisions. We need to come together. We need to decide what that ultimate concept and creative direction is going to be. And at that point, we need to know how to do effective communication and feedback. So, because also that whole process, what you really want is to strengthen and build your team's inner
Absolutely.
capabilities
Yeah.
so that by the next brief and project, they're excited, they're motivated, they're willing, and they're able to do that whole process of collaboration, but even better than before. And that's where that's growing spiral of growth for organization comes in. Each project is a learning cycle and internal skills capability growth cycle. So you're not just churning out the same stuff, but as an organization and a business, you're building better and better and improved and strengthened internal capabilities for the sustainability and growth of the business as well.
Absolutely. You described that so well and so succinctly that you covered all my questions in the collaboration area of our discussion. I like to lean into that with all of my guests because I really, really want audiences to understand how critically important collaboration is in our community and in our business of what we do. And I love the fact that you leaned into the idea that this is a business. That's kind of, to me, it's hand in glove. As a creative, as you're creative, I've led so many different creative teams, so I feel like I can kind of speak to that creative person who's wanting to join the industry. And I think all of the examples that you gave and the direction that you laid out was so important. I say what you said, but I say it a little bit different. I try to remind students or new professionals that all of the work that you're going to do in your professional career, because they've chosen a career that's based in design and not just art, right? You could use art, but we're designing something. And when you design something, you're always going to be working for a client, which means that all of the ideas that you have, solutions that you come up with, creative ideation, that kind of all belongs to the client. So in a sense, it should take the pressure off of you that you don't have to fall in love with the idea, because if you've done as you've described in this visionary work where you've been given room to experiment and play and take risks, and I say fail forward, I love what you said, learn and grow, then you should have, such as a team, such a huge volume of solutions to your client's problem, that if they don't like the one that you present to them, you could go back and modify and come back with a new solution or another solution and something different. So I really like that. Now, please react
Yes.
to what I was saying.
Yeah, I'd love to react and build on that as well, because something I often say to the teams as well is all the ideas that have been generated, once we're converging to really like pick out the key insights and the key drivers and the key direction that we want to go in, you can bank all the ideas and the work that you've done. Don't throw it away.
Right, right.
You can build an archive of ideas. And that's what I used to do. I mean, I was a producer for 15 years and then, certain projects which had very tight timelines, as we all know what like I wouldn't have time to do a whole lovely, nice, creative, experimental play ideation process. But I could go through the bank of previous ideas and see which one could apply brilliantly to this particular project. And off we go.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
that's the other added benefit of it. And I think there is a reluctance in our industry to put time towards R&D, research and development, or the ideation
Yeah.
phase and what that entails. So what I like to say is go slow now, because that will allow you to go fast later.
Mm,
Because if you take the time to really do the research on who your audience is, what their inner needs are, what are their motivations, what are the drivers that you could be activating, and use that to inform the design and ideation, and you take that time, it means you are more assured and confident and secure in the knowledge that it's going to be effective, and it's going to save you time and money in the production and the output. That it's not, once it's finally hit the market, that you find it doesn't reach the consumer in the way you wanted. It doesn't create the sell through and the numbers that you were supposed to be hitting. And then you're thinking back and trying to, as the client, figure out what went wrong,
right,
or in the production cycle, what went wrong, what were costly mistakes you learned halfway through, and then you have to change the production cycle. I've been involved in projects like that. And then they were like, oh my goodness, everything you showed us, we should have done that at the beginning. And I was like, well, this can be your legacy. You can do this for your next projects the way that you would like to do it. And we will try and save the project and get it back on track now. So yeah, it's just take the time now. It's going to save you so much time and money down the line and pretty much guarantee you success.
absolutely.
For me, it's so logical. However, it's still a thing that I'm encountering to get people to take that initial time
Yeah.
and understand that the benefits and rewards are going to be tenfold later in the process.
Absolutely. Well, I just was looking at the time, and I feel like we're going to have to do a part two because we only got about halfway through the range of things that I would really enjoy talking to you about. But I'm going to have to move on to our close. But I would love to come back and actually have another episode with you sometime. That would be so much fun. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Intriguing conversation. Really enjoyed it. I would love if you could share with our audience what are some great ways to stay in touch with you, to follow your work, get a hold of your book. Yeah, please let them know.
Well, thank you so much, Theron, for this amazing opportunity to speak with you and exchange with you and hear more and learn from you as well. And I love how much exciting alignment there is with our approaches. So thank you so much for that. And I'm excited on the feedback and response of your wonderful listeners, what resonated, other thoughts they have, thought provocations it might have caused. I welcome all of that debate and dialogue to come as well. So if any of your listeners want to find out more about what I do, They can find me on LinkedIn at Pigalle Tavakkoli. I'm very active on LinkedIn about all the various strands of the work I do. They can also go to my website, theschoolofexperiencedesign.net, if they're interested in training and courses, and also in terms of creating bespoke keynotes for conferences and events as well. And also my guidebook, which just came out in the end of last year. So for if you want new skills, new ways of thinking, or you just want to reinforce what you're intuitively doing, or want to have the vocabulary or some processes and methods so you can be really intentional about what you're designing and the impact that you're looking to generate, then hopefully you will find my guidebook very helpful, because I didn't want it to be academic and theoretical. I wanted it to be very practical and immediately applicable. So, yes, you're very welcome to go and view my guidebook to help you. I have presented it in a linear step-by-step way with the building blocks, but I've also really wanted them and designed them to be modular, so people can also pick and choose different projects, different briefs. A different block might be useful, stack them, use them in a different way. And ultimately, I invite your listeners and viewers to use them to help yourselves to become your own unique type of experience designer, because you bring your own wonderful set of experiences and thoughts, perspectives, and approaches. And I just hope that I'm helping to build on your internal capabilities to bring that to this wonderful, fast growing field of experience design.
It's so amazing. I'm really appreciative of that. Thanks for taking the time to explain that. The audience members that listen to this show, I believe, are hungry learners. They are curating the elements that feed their own journey, and so I know that they're going to have a good time digging into all of that information, and myself included. I'm so passionate now to read your book, because there's so many similarities to my own journey and my own passion that I put into work that I do as well. Pigalle, thanks so much for being here, and thanks to our audience for tuning in. This is the beginning of a brand new season, and I'm really excited that you're here. Please tell others if you like what you hear. Let everybody know. Our objective here on this show is to help you to be the best version of you in the experience economy. So thanks again.